Good morning. It's Wednesday morning, and we are back for another episode of Small Business Connections. We're the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Our goal with each and every episode is to give you something you can walk away with and put to work in your business and in your life. As entrepreneurs, our businesses and our lives go hand in hand. So it's important that we really understand that, and that some of our guests will talk about that part of our world. I want to remind you to subscribe. You can subscribe anywhere you're listening to this podcast, or you can subscribe on YouTube. And I keep telling people, subscribe on YouTube because my children think I'm a nerd because I'm still not at 1,000 subscribers. 1,000 subscribers will also get me monetized. So help me out there. I'm a small business, and that would be a good help for me. I also want to thank everybody who has donated to burgersandbands.org over the past couple of weeks. We've raised about $3,500 in the past couple of weeks for this. It's not our $200,000 that we would have raised had we been able to have our events without COVID, but it has been good to see the money coming in, especially from listeners, and I want to thank you for that. If you haven't donated yet, there's still time. The money we raise goes into mental health initiatives within our own community, but also can be used in your community. So go to burgersandbands.org to learn more about how you can have us give money to your children's schools. That's a really good way to do it. We are on episode 99. So Monday we'll have our 100th episode, and that's really exciting. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we're streaming live. I tell you this so that you can ask questions. We have experts on this show, people who really know what they're talking about and can help your small business. So if you hear something and you have further questions, leave a comment below wherever you're listening to this or watching this, and we can get answers to you. If you're doing it by video, if you're putting your comments below a video, we can get right back to you on the screen and answer your questions here. So please do ask us some questions. Today we have Mia Hewett. She's here to talk about fear and overcoming your fears. So Mia, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I'm excited because to be fair, I run a business. I also run a charity. And so the podcast is sort of a third thing I run. And I don't often look at the subjects ahead of time.
Oh.
And so my son sent me stuff over. He says, this is what you're going to be talking about, because he's my producer.
Yeah.
He sends me the list and he says, this is what you're going to be talking about. I thought, this is going to be the best show. I'm so excited.
Yay.
So,
Yay.
Yeah. So tell everybody what you do.
Sure, absolutely. So what I do is I'm a business coach that actually heals trauma. And people always usually go, what? But what happened to me, and I'm sure like many people, Anne, that you've had on your show, it's like oftentimes, the things that we've overcome ourselves is like the greatest gift we could give the world, right? And so I just was one of those people who, when I was really young, my father, who I love dearly, I have no judgment inside of any of what I'm going to share with you. But when I was really young, I was about 5 years old, and I remember him calling me, and I was, really shy, which shy is just a fear of judgment back then. I was really, really shy. I was afraid of him. Of all the people I was afraid of the most, it was my father, because he could be the most loving man. And then in a split second, something could set him off. And as a child, I never knew what that was. And it was like he just would become very volatile. So I always felt like I had to walk around on eggshells. And I remember him calling me when I was about 5 years old and telling me we were going to go outside. And I was like, why does he want to go outside with me? Like, why isn't he calling my sisters? And I kept asking him, like, well, why are you calling me? And he was like, oh, I just want to spend time with you. And so he takes me outside and he asks me, what is your favorite chicken? And I was like, well, that one, of course. Like, there was this one that always would come over, no matter when I came outside. She would always come over to me. She was my favorite chicken in the world. And he was like, okay, well, today's the day we're going to kill her. Right? Like,
oh my gosh,
the way that my father thought that he was going to make me super strong was that. And so what I didn't understand, Anne, back then, which I would have loved for somebody to have made sense of all of this for me, is in that moment when that happened, I went into a massive confusion pattern, right? Like I didn't know what was happening. I didn't even know that that could happen. So I
Right.
became really, really, really confused. My mind shut down. I froze and I couldn't make sense of anything. Like my thoughts were coming so fast
Right.
that I would just freeze. So now why I'm sharing this information is when I built my first $1 million company, I would literally have these attacks, like when a certain person would come into my office or come into and they had any kind of energy that is like my father was, I would go into this complete shutdown, frozen mode, become confused, like literally become the the most stupid person in the world. I couldn't make sense of anything. And so I didn't know these were connected. I
Right.
had run that pattern for so long that I couldn't understand how I could become so successful to the outside world that everybody saw me as a success. I was really good at what I did, but I
Right.
felt internally like a failure.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes total sense. And I think so
Yeah.
many of us are there. So,
Yeah.
so many of us have that. Actually,
Yeah.
that's one of the first things we're going to talk about is this idea of imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And I loved it when you said this because I went to a conference a few years ago. There were 1,000 people in the room, and the person on stage said, "How many of you feel like imposters?" And he talked about becoming a CEO of his corporation and how he sat there the first day thinking, I wonder when they're going to come in and realize I shouldn't be in here.
Yes.
And he asked this question of everybody in the room, how many of you feel every single person, and we're
Yes.
talking all of them were CEOs. Every
Yes.
person in the room owns their own business or is the CEO of a business, and every single one of them felt that way.
That's
But we all
exactly.
think we're alone in it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you, and I'll explain why. Okay. So this will make a lot of sense, but I'm such a visual person. I'm going to draw it on a board so it makes
Okay.
sense to everybody. So here's what happens to us, right? So if consider that this is a lifeline, right? Our lifeline. So when a child is born, everybody is born whole, perfect, and complete, meaning not one baby is born with a self-esteem issue, right? So
Right.
whole, perfect, and complete, if this is. And so what I want you to consider is that what happens to us is we go along inside of this, there's this harmony within ourselves, others in the world. So we're whole, perfect, and complete. And then we go into an experience, we have an experience. Most often this trauma happens, I've had a couple 18 months, but on average, somewhere between 2 to 4 years old are the most common, sometimes 5, but that's usually a second, like that's already happened now. It's like after the original. I'm looking for the
Right.
original trauma. The original trauma happens and on average between 2 and 4. So let's say it happens around here. And then what happens is you go into an experience where normally this would close as a whole, perfect, and complete circle. And something happens that you literally get stopped. Okay. Like emotionally, like what happened to me, but it doesn't have to be that traumatic in the sense of what society considers. It could be something as I'm going to share what this one gentleman just had. I helped him find his trauma, and his was when he was 4 years old. He had come home from preschool and he said, Daddy, 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 look, I colored inside the lines. And his dad turned to him, looked at the piece of paper, turned to him and said, wow, I guess you don't have much of an imagination. So it doesn't have to be something huge. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Right.
That was enough to cause him to emotionally. So what happens to us is how this happens is for a trauma to happen is what's happening is a child grows by an emotional bond of trust. When that emotional bond of trust is broken, we experience an emotional trauma. When the trauma happens, we don't finish the completeness of whole, perfect, and complete like we were here. And so we literally get stopped and it causes an open loop. It causes us to split a little bit from ourself. So this is the day we created our ego. Okay. The egoic self that people talk about that nobody understands what it is, or the false self. Okay.
Right.
So now here's what happens. So here's the answer to the question of how do we solve fear? Like, what's the imposter syndrome? Why does everybody have it? Because everybody's experienced this split inside of themselves where they felt, because of the trauma that happened, that the who they really were when they were whole, perfect, and complete, there was something must be wrong with that for that to have happened. So they split, and a split is a strong word, right? Because you don't, it's not like you come away from yourself, you don't become but you split, and then you become a way to survive your life. So for me, I became shy, introverted, right? I already had some of those tendencies, but that was the day that I literally like withdrew within myself. And we all think we're all alone because every one of us withdrew. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's, you just heard me talk a little bit about burgers and bans for suicide prevention. We hear this all the time. For depression and anxiety. People are like, nobody will understand. When the truth is, when you start talking to people, they all have those traumatic moments. They all have those things that about themselves that they totally can understand you. Maybe they didn't have a father who did what yours did, but they have had people who did other things because we're human, right?
Absolutely.
It's part of what we are. So yeah, the imposter syndrome is something we all experience. The other one is this morning did a presentation in a group, and honestly, the entire time I was thinking, so how are they looking at me? How are they judging me? What do they think? Right. And we have that fear of being judged on a regular basis. So how do we overcome that? Or what are your thoughts on this?
Sure, absolutely. So the interesting thing about the fear of being judged, right? So this happened at the original trauma as well, right? Because there was the judge when we withdrew, we judged ourselves. As children, we didn't go, oh, dad's just having a bad day today, or mom's just really having a bad day today, right? We didn't sit there and go, because back then when we're children, we think they're God.
Right.
Like we don't see them on their own journey and their own their own, like lessons and learnings they're trying to figure out themselves. We don't see them like that. So what happens is, as children, we go and we judge ourselves. We go, oh my gosh, something must be really wrong with me, instead of that, right? And then what happens is that pattern of thinking that it must be us keeps us inside of the fear of never having it happen again, keeps us fearing other people's judgments. But there's a complete misunderstanding. So the biggest misunderstanding people have, so if we go back to understanding the trauma, the biggest misconception or misunderstanding is thinking other people's judgments or reactions have anything to do with me. Right? Like there's nothing, their reaction, my father's reaction and my father's way of handling that had to do with his trauma and his childhood, right?
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
So and Mia, I'm going to get an explicit rating for this, and I'm sorry, Whitney, who is doing this, but quite honestly, there's the simple way of saying it is it's their own shit. Really, I'm so sorry to say it that way, but it's their own shit.
Absolutely.
And we all, if we can look at it, I like that term only because it makes it for real. It makes you go, oh yeah, it is. This had nothing to do with me. Right?
It has nothing to do with you. And so it's like how you really, when you internalize that, not as a concept, but when you allow that to come into your body and really feel the truth of what you just said, it really is their own shit. Then there is a place where in self-acceptance that I'm not here to control anyone. I can't control another person's thoughts. I can only, like when we accept, there's nothing that I'm going to be able to do that's going to have somebody decide they're going to like me or not like me, because it's all based on their own trauma. So I'm completely free to be who I really am, who I'm meant to be and who I really am, and really allow people. This is the way that I really have I have complete freedom and total self-acceptance regarding like any kind of judgment whatsoever, because I really do clearly know that it is about their trauma. And so in that self-acceptance, I have total freedom to allow them the dignity of their own life journey. Because everywhere that we are judging ourselves, right? Everywhere we're projecting judgment is literally coming back to us as our own judgment of self. So the greatest thing that we could ever do is look at what we're judging and look to see where is that in us? Does that make sense? And when we can really see the gifts of like, oh, wow, I was judging this person for this because I don't like that part of myself, or I don't like that I do that. Awesome. Now in that acceptance, I can move to forgiveness. So what would I need to forgive myself for? And then when we can get to true forgiveness, and not a concept of forgiveness, but really in our body where we can truly forgive that we didn't know what we didn't know. Like there's no way that I could possibly know that not only that experience was going to happen, but I didn't even know that my dad was in his own trauma when it all happened. And every child took on that experience as if there was something wrong with them. It's time to really bring that to the world and to the light, and really have people see that the healing must, even though that happened, and I'm not saying we have to agree with it, but when we acknowledge it, acknowledgement doesn't equal agreement, right? When we can acknowledge that that's what happened, then we can move to a place of acceptance and forgiveness so that we become free. Because the worst thing, in my opinion, than all of this is me holding on to the resentment of what happened, which is like into drinking poison and expecting someone else to pay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, as you're saying this, I think, you hear a lot about mindfulness these days, and you said, it's what's in us. And I had the most incredible thing happen, and with a very, very strong woman who I know, and I thought, God, she just doesn't like me, and maybe I don't like her. And then when we sat down and talked about it, because we're both very mindful people, and we realized that our two core values, she has a core value of always presenting your best face, and which I think is very noble. It's a very strong to be able to always say, no matter what happens, I'm always going to be my strongest self. Put on my best face. Well, my number one core value is authenticity. So you get what you see, you see what, and you get, it's it's all together. And so of course we clashed, and knowing that, having that mindfulness thing, knowing that who we are, these things are important. So I used to think that I'd call them woo-woo, these woo-woo things that were out there in the world. And they're not that important, but they're so important. They're so much a part of our lives.
They're so important because, Anne, like, business is really all about relationships. And if we don't understand our own relationship with ourselves, how can we possibly master relationships and business? It really comes down to such simple, fundamental principles. But can you feel that inside of when she said you always have to put on your best face? Can you feel that is what she did in her original trauma?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the nice thing about this particular woman, is that I knew exactly what her trauma was, because we were able to discuss it. And she knew exactly where mine came from. And so knowing these things, having it out there, and I know it's an unusual situation. That situation in particular just happens to be two women who are very vocal and very willing to share and very aware of who we are. So that helped. But if we could all be that way, life would be a lot simpler.
Oh, totally. We wouldn't care about anybody's judgments.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
So you've started multiple businesses, you've had multiple successes, but to get there, you have to fail. You never get there without failure, but we fear it more than anything else. So talk a little bit about that. Actually, I'm going to check comments, because it does look like you just got to oh, shoot. Apparently they're getting a lag. Hopefully this will pick up. Somebody just said fix the lag over on Twitter. So there's nothing we can do about it. Hopefully it'll pick up and they'll hear us.
Sure. So talk about, absolutely. Fear of failure. Here's what I so first of all, let me just acknowledge anyone who's experiencing that, that is really coming from, again, this exact thing, right? Because this was the ultimate failure for us. That emotional trauma that happened is the ultimate failure. And so for us, it's like when we haven't processed it and gone through it and really cleared the misunderstanding and misconceptions about that situation, we hold on to it fearing that it could happen again. So the biggest fear is that we're going to fail again, because we've never, in order not to have it feel like a failure, we would have to actually know how to process it. Does that make sense, Anne? Like we would have to, right? We would have to be able to take that situation and be able to look and sort out what did I make it mean? What's the lie? What's the truth? What's the misunderstanding? We have to clear that so that we could get to the truth and then accept what is the truth and then move through forgiveness. So we'd have to be able to process it. So I want to say that because that is at the core why people really fear failure. The truth is, all successes that I've had are just revised mistakes. Like every success I've ever had.
That's a great way to think of it.
You could look at it as like it was a revised mistake. It was me going, I didn't know that was going to happen, because like nobody wakes up in the morning going, I can't wait to make a mistake today. Like it doesn't happen to any of us, right? Like every single time that it happens, we feel blindsided, right? Because something we didn't see, right? There was something that we didn't see. So the first thing is all successes are just revised mistakes. But I have totally changed now that I've processed my original trauma and I no longer have that running in the fear of the background of my mind. It changed my relationship to failure. Like I don't view failure like people view failure. I'm not afraid to make mistakes because every single time I have learned so much. And then when I go and apply that learning or that lesson, it truly has changed my life and given me so many more successes. So here's the basis that I want to really give people. The key to success is to stop framing problems as statements. Like stop saying like, this is a problem, or, oh my God, that's a problem, as if it's a fact. Because here's the truth, Ian. Like the way that it works based on the universal law of polarity is the law of polarity says, right? I'm going to draw it again because I'm such a visual person. But the law of the polarity says is there's nothing in this universe that exists in a half. Everything exists in a whole, in an equal opposite. So meaning for there to be an up, there's a down. For there to be an in, there's an out. For there to be a failure, so-called failure, there is a success. For there to be a problem, the equal and opposite solution must equally exist at the same moment in time. Not a different moment. So at the same moment that you're experiencing a problem, consider there's a solution right there. The key is when we stop framing problems as statements like, oh my God, like it's fixed. And we start recognizing that, wow, if there's a problem, there's a solution right now. And then we get curious, because the key to accessing the solution is curiosity. So we have to pull back enough away from it to go, interesting, right? And so when we don't have it as fixed, we then literally free ourselves to get curious and go, well, now we just want to change the statement, right? So we want to change it. Like we want to say something like, wow, like how could I, if I could have the solution right now, what would be the solution? And then brain dump and then pick the best one and implement that one.
Exactly. Well, and that goes to the idea that you have to be willing to make decisions. Oh, totally. Because I think we so often get frozen. We so often think, oh my God, now what? And we get frozen instead of saying, okay, well, let's do the next thing. And can you feel that's that trauma again right there? That original trauma that happened when we became frozen. What happens is that freezing
And so like when we heal that first piece and that original trauma, we stop freezing.
Right.
Like I
Right.
don't freeze anymore. I don't have those like, like I don't do that. I used to, I used to be real, like, I couldn't talk in front of people. I become frozen inside of the fear, and I don't have that anymore. So clearly if I can do this, somebody else can, because there's nothing special about me.
So, well, and I think that, well, there's something special about all of us, and we just need to realize that there is something special about all of us. And
right.
we
I
just
mean,
have
in
to
the
find that
ability.
inside. But yeah, and the ability. Yes, exactly.
Everybody can develop this ability. There's nothing special about the ability to do what I'm doing. But you're right. Everybody is special, but definitely there's nothing special about the ability. It's so easily learned. Once we understand how is what the key is. Makes sense?
Is it? There's a saying that says if one person can do it, everybody can do it. Right?
Yeah.
Isn't there a saying out there that along those lines? Because I think that's true.
Yeah.
I used to say that. Yeah. I used to be a marathoner, and I would say, people say, oh, I wish I could do that. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got legs that are about this long. Of course you can do that. If I can do that, you can do this.
Exactly. Exactly. So. I love that you're a marathoner. I used to be one as well. I ran all the major marathons in the world. So we have that in common.
Great. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I did 16 before I finally said, okay, that's enough. My body's done.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I got to. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done now.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah. But I'm glad I did it. I learned so much.
Oh, totally.
So let's talk about this. So you have the fear of failure. Why then would you be afraid of success? Because that's the opposite. You're succeeding. Why would you be afraid of that?
Yeah. So the fear of success, and again, I'm always going to go back to that original trauma, right?
Right.
Because here's the thing about success and why it's connected to the original trauma. So when the original trauma happened and we pull back inside ourselves and we make decisions, these decisions come very quickly. We made decisions about ourselves, other people, and the world. Like I made a decision that right then when that trauma happened, like, there was something clearly wrong with me that this would even happen to me. But I also made the decision other people aren't trustworthy, not even your own father, right? Like, I didn't trust anyone. And the world was a completely like unsafe place. So those decisions come very quickly. So the fear of success is when I withdrew inside myself, and I remember saying to myself, and you guys can feel this, that you've said something along this way of feeling when it happened. I'm never going to allow this to happen to me again. Right. In that pulling back, the reason why the fear of success is it goes against that decision to pull back and never be seen. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Does it make sense? So in order to succeed, and this is what I say, this is why I heal this first before I really help people, my clients develop 6- and 7-figure businesses, because money is actually easy. Making money is easy. It's a recipe. It's very, very simple. What takes people out as to why they don't make 6 and 7 figures has nothing to do with the recipe of how to create any successful business. It has everything to do with who they think they are being, or who they are, or who they think they're like, this trauma and the fear of being seen. And what all business, in order to really make the impact, is the whole thing about marketing is to be seen. Right. Exactly. Like, right. So it's like you are literally going against what the recipe is for business. So that's why we heal this first, so that they can really show up and be seen and feel free to do so and not get taken out emotionally, which is what really stops people. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really great point. And I was thinking earlier before we had this conversation, and it's not a fully developed thought, so it's a sort of half-baked idea in my head. But there are a lot of people who are successful who are narcissists. And I wonder whether part of that is because that break did something else for them that made them say, nope, you know what? I'm not going to let people judge me. I'm not going to let people do this. I'm just going to be completely about me. Yeah. Yes, and absolutely. Even though that's bad, I think that's the positive. And that's why
they've been successful because they have let go of all those things that we're holding on to because we have a conscience, right?
Well, I would say like, so I don't, here's what I would say, because I've seen all of it and I've healed all of it. And here's what I would say is when that original trauma happens, what happens to the individual is they, in that split of self, what they do is that in those decisions that I'm never going to have this happen to me again, there are a certain amount of people who went into superiority ego, which is what you're saying. They're just like, kill everybody else off. I don't care about anybody. I'm just going to do this. And it's all about me in order to
Right.
survive that trauma. So they went into
Right.
superiority ego. And then there's a portion of people who, when that trauma happened, they withdrew and hid and went into inferiority ego. Neither one is right or wrong. They both are survival techniques. It's just that in our society, we like to make the superiority ego one the bad guy. But in truth, both are so ineffective. Neither one really works, and both are trying to survive something. So
Right.
I've worked with both because both people come to me because even the people who are in superiority ego, they don't feel any more fulfilled. They don't feel any more connected. They don't feel any more love. They're literally struggling in a hard shell of like totally, trying to survive. And so my heart goes out to them too,
Right.
because it's really just their own survival mechanism. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It
Yeah,
makes total sense. So before we go on to the next subject, I'm going to
sure.
take this off of here for a minute, and I want to say something. If you guys are listening to this and not watching it, I'd like you to
Yeah.
come back. And I'm totally changing subjects here because it's something that I noticed while Mia's talking.
Mm.
There is something. Zoom. We're all on Zoom right now. We're all on Zoom, and Mia does something. I happen to do it too, and I do it. I think because I've done it my whole life, and Mia may have done it her whole life.
Yeah.
But on Zoom, we all sit with our hands on our lap, and we try to sit up straight, and we try to be very proper, and we do this thing where we're almost robotic because we're trying to so hard to be proper. So Mia, the
Oh,
whole time she's talking, is using her hands in a big way, and she's brought
yeah.
them up, brought them almost up to the top of the screen, and
Yeah.
very wide and very big. And she's using her hands. I do it a lot myself, but I've actually been judging myself about this. Is it too much? But at watching you, Mia,
Yeah.
has been interesting because I think it makes you more human. And I
Oh,
want to
yeah.
say,
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, even if you had no interest whatsoever
Yeah.
in what we're talking about, go back and look at the video because you will see that this is
Yeah.
an effective way of reaching people. Mia's very outgoing, and
Yeah.
the hand gestures you're using has really been eye-opening for me. So I had to
Oh,
interrupt because we're all on Zoom now. We're not. This isn't just for speakers. This is
yeah.
for everybody. If you're on Zoom right now, be bigger, be more,
Mm,
show them who
mm.
you are because I think it's important.
Yeah,
Now,
I love when you say that. I don't have any rules. I think what you're feeling is I have absolutely no rules about, oh, I can only look this way, or I can only do this, or I can only be seen this way. I have no rules. But I will say I've been an entrepreneur for over 33 years now. And so where I will also say I don't really do a lot of speaking engagements in corporations anymore because
mhm.
I'm so blatantly honest that they have too many rules about the way I have to, like what the way they want it to be said or how I'm supposed to look. And I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry. I've been an entrepreneur way too long to follow all of your rules.
Right,
Like
yeah.
I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. So like, I just, you have to kind of know yourself and because you really believe, strive for that authenticity and which I really admire. It's all about being authentic. I'm just not willing to be inauthentic. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah,
And I love that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think if more of us could be who we are, people would
Yeah.
like us,
Oh,
all of us, a
totally.
lot better. I mean,
Totally.
it was not until I realized that, oh, I am who I am, and people either like me this way or they don't. Most people do. I actually
Yeah.
have a lot of people who like me, and it's okay. And
Yeah.
as long as I look at them and not the people who don't like me, it's easy.
Yeah.
Life becomes easy.
Well, and I love what you're saying right there. And I'd love to add something for people struggling with that because I get a lot of people off my ads who will say to me, oh my gosh, I'm so like, I want to know more for you and I want to buy your book because of the way you responded to the haters.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I want to share like why that is so that people can really get something from this because, here's why I want to share this so much, because I think this would help people really develop that skill. The thing that I would want people to, understand, like when we really think about it. So the first thing is, right, going back to that trauma. So whoever is reacting on my Facebook ad post, it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
Right? The
Right.
illusion, I just want to say that the illusion is that it is about me. The illusion they have that whatever is triggering them, they think it's me. But there is no way, because feel this, everybody. Where do our emotions come from? Inside of us or outside of us?
Right. They come from inside, right?
They're inside. So what happens is the way that emotions work, and most people don't understand this because they were brought up in a household that didn't understand it either. So their parents didn't understand it. So they've been passed down from generation to generation of a misunderstanding or misconception about where our emotions come from. But our emotions actually come from, this is how this happens. So we think a thought, and in that thought, we attach a meaning. Right? So when we think of something and we attach a meaning, that meaning produces an emotion, which if you look at it from neutrality, it's just our internal guidance system. It's just feedback. Hey, did you see you put a meaning on that thought? And if it was a positive meaning, it's going to feel good. And if it's a negative meaning, it's going to feel bad. Right?
Right.
But all that's happening is they have a meaning about something. That's all that it means. Well, all fear is a result of an attachment, right? So an attachment to a meaning. So they're making it mean something. So I have to give that context so that it makes more sense of what I'm going to tell you next. But it's really important to understand that, because that's what's happening. It's not about me. So how I diffuse this, because that's just their ego. Their ego gets triggered. Right? And they really feel all what they're feeling. They're not pretending, right? So what I do is I just acknowledge them, because here's the thing that we're not taught in our society that is a great skill, the skill of acknowledgement. And here's what I want everybody to understand. Acknowledgement doesn't equal agreement. I can acknowledge someone for what they're feeling, what the way they're seeing the life, but it doesn't mean that I agree with them, right?
Right.
I mean, it's really important to understand that, because there can be a misconception about what it is that, what's really happening. So I just want to acknowledge people. And inside of me acknowledging them, when I acknowledge them, I will just say, acknowledge their words. So don't change words. When you practice this skill, do not change the meaning. So if they say, oh, you just, like, wow, if you're doing this, you just care so much about money, because I've made a lot of money. And so they assume that I shouldn't charge $5.90 for my book. They think that that is crazy, right? I understand why they would think that, right? But they also don't understand how much Facebook ads cost. And they don't understand the whole picture of what goes behind a Facebook ad. It costs me far more than $5.90.
Yeah, exactly.
To do that. So anyway, so what I'll say is I'll acknowledge them. I'll use their words. Wow, thank you so much. I really get that, this really occurs to you, that I'm doing this because I'm greedy or this or that, whatever the words they use, I acknowledge first.
Right.
That once I've acknowledged, now I can bridge them to the way that I see it. But I can't get them there without acknowledging it first. So I acknowledge, and then I will say, consider the reason I actually charged the $5.90 is because of the amount of people I'm trying to reach in order to bring this message of the truth because my mission is to help 5,000 people. I'm 52, 5,000 entrepreneurs before I die, to help 5,000 entrepreneurs who will then know the truth of how we really work as a human, so that we can live our potential, and know the truth about how life really works, so that we can crush it and make 6- and 7-figure businesses. Because, Anne, this is ridiculous that only 2% of females ever break 7 figures. Like, I'm all for men and women, but I am 100% for the fact that women need to understand how making 6 and 7 figures is actually easy. It's this stuff here that we're talking about that stops people. So my mission is to do that. 5,000 people before I die. That those people then like impart that wisdom to their own 5,000 people that I have impacted over 25 million people. That is my mission. And I will say to people, like, the reason I charge $5.90 is to accomplish that mission. That's the reason why I do that. And then they go, oh my gosh, like, now it's a whole different context, right? Like now therefore they don't fight me on side of that, because now they understand what the bigger intention is and the higher purpose. So I hope that helps anyone who ever struggles with, you want to always acknowledge first before you bridge them to the truth of what you're doing and why that would serve a greater purpose.
Absolutely. It's, as you're saying this, I have a client who we finally said to him, please stop looking at your reviews. We'll answer them for you. Because they would just break his heart if he got a bad review, which he seldom gets, maybe one bad review every 2 years. But if he gets it, it just throws him for a loop. And so we finally said, we'll do it. And that's exactly how we do it. We acknowledge first. Thank you so much. We're so sorry you had a bad experience. Thank you so much for letting us know. And this is what we're doing to correct it, or this is what we're doing. But it's that acknowledgement, first of all, that helps them, but also other people who are reading the review, right? They see that you're a reasonable person.
Totally. So, because, like we know, we're not looking for everyone. Everyone is not our ideal client. Right. So that person isn't my ideal client, but I'm not acknowledging them because they're not my ideal client, or they are my ideal client. I'm acknowledging because in acknowledging, it closes the loop of like having them like make up this whole meaning and story about me that isn't in their head, that isn't even true. And then it allows my ideal client to look at the way that I responded. And those are the people that I'm here to help. Right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So, all right. So usually we ask people, what are your favorite books? But you have a book.
I do.
A book Meant for Me.
Yeah. Meant for More.
Meant for More. And you said earlier that you wish somebody had written this book and given it to you when you were younger. So talk a little bit more about what the book's about. How, I think you've got a special for our listeners. So tell us a little bit more.
Absolutely. So the book is called Meant for More: How to Stop Secretly Struggling and Become a Force to be Reckoned with. It's a great book. It's the book that not because I wrote it, but it's the book I wish somebody would have given me a long time ago. This would have helped me forever. I've had people go, oh my gosh, your book changed my life. Just reading my book, never working with me, and so forth, which is the greatest compliment ever, because I don't really consider myself like a writer in the sense of that, but I told it in story form so that everybody could uncover their own original trauma, be able to clear the misunderstandings and misconceptions that you've picked up along your life so far, so that you can live free to be truly who you were meant to be. So it really is for that. You can get it for free. I have a special link called Mia, meantformorebook.com. Just go there and then enter the password, because it is free. It's a digital download. So it's a in digital form, but the password is capital F, one word, free book. So free book, capital F, is the password, and it's Mia, meantformorebook.com. I would recommend that book for sure.
So Mia, if you can do me a favor and put that, I'm going to tell everybody what's coming up next. If you can put that in our chat, I'll put it in our show notes afterwards, and they can get, all the information there for sure. So give me 1 minute to tell everybody what we got coming up next. Okay. So I wanted to let you know, Monday. I don't know why I think it's Monday today, but on Monday, we're going to have our 100th episode. And I'm really excited about it because we're going to talk about something all of us have dealt with before. Scope creep. How often have you gotten a client who you bring in at a certain price and then they say, oh, could you do this one more? Could you do this one more? And we're going to talk a little bit about how to avoid scope creep in your work. It's really important that this is a really important tool. But I want to talk a little bit real quick about that 100th episode and what it means to me. And not just the scope creep, but people keep saying to me, so you're doing these podcasts, you've done 100 of them. What are you getting out of it? Are you making money? And we're not monetized. Hopefully we'll get monetized on YouTube, but I don't, we don't have millions of listeners. We don't have millions of viewers. So that's going to be a harder thing to get to. What I do have is I've spoken to 100 entrepreneurs since March, 100 people I hadn't talked to before about their businesses. I've learned something from each and every one of them. And not only that, but I've given something from each and every one of them to all the people who are listening. And that means a lot to me to be able to give back. So sometimes our wins aren't monetary. It's not, oh, I got new clients. And we have gotten new clients from it. But I want you to think about your wins today. What are your wins? And sometimes your wins can be a loss. I will tell you that we've had those moments in our company where I thought something was a total loss. And we had somebody else in the company say, oh, that was what I thought was the biggest win of last year because we learned this many things from it. So it's so important that we think about our wins in a different way and don't just look at that monetary part of it. There's so much more to it than that. Mia, I'm going to come back to you real quick.
Sure. Absolutely.
So you said people can reach you at miahewett.com.
Yeah.
Where else can they reach you?
I'm the one, my team doesn't answer my emails. I do. So I respond to every email. So they can just personally email me at miahewett.com.
Okay.
Send me an email.
That's great. And are you on social media anywhere?
Yes. I'm on Instagram and on Facebook. And what I'm under, it is Mia, but I'm known as the Awakened Entrepreneur. So Mia Hewett, the Awakened Entrepreneur is what it is. Because every time people heal this inside of themselves, they always would say to me, oh my gosh, I feel so awake. And that's why they started calling me, you're like the Awakened Entrepreneur. So that's how I got my name.
That's awesome. Well, and that's it, is we so often, there's just like one little thing. And there's this one moment for me, I think I've talked about it on the show several times. I went to Michael Hyatt's conference a few years ago that was planning for the next year. And he said, so what are your limiting beliefs? And when I really boiled it down, I thought my biggest limiting belief is I don't think people like me. I don't think they like me at all. And then when I started thinking about it and I started thinking about who am I going to tell this to, right? If I were to say to certain people, I don't think anybody likes me, I would realize what the true answer was, which is I thought people didn't like me because I was maybe too authentic. I was too real. And then I realized, no, that's what makes people talk to me because everybody talks to me. So it's just one thing that just changed everything. And after that, I was like, oh, I can let go now. I'm good.
Nice.
So
awesome.
so getting to know who you are is really a huge part of life. So so you stick around. Everybody else, I will see you Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please tune in Wednesday. How fun is that? 100 episodes since March. Pretty exciting. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.